It is a struggle to emerge. It is not easy to emerge. It is nice to say it, and it's easy to shout about it, but it is not easy to emerge. It is as difficult as childbirth. And childbirth is called labor. You cannot keep your hair fancy and give birth. It might mess up your makeup to give birth. You can't look poised and polite and give birth. It strains you to give birth. Sweat and pushing and labor to give birth. All the women in the room say amen. Everything that starts out one way doesn't end that way, and so many times we fall in love with the place that God has placed us in, only to find out that God is a moving God. He is always moving. He is always doing. He is always shaking. He is always transforming. He's always taking us from place to place and from glory to glory. And as soon as you get used to one thing, he moves you to the next thing, and he shakes you up and throws you out of balance, and then teaches you to live by faith and not by sight. Because you will live a life of uncertainty all of your life. So get used to it. Expect it. Stop running from it. Stop hiding from it. Stop trying to get away from it. You will never be sure of yourself and absolutely solid, because the moment you get good at where you are, God will push you into the next dimension, take you into the next space, move you from place to place, so that you're always needing him to hold you, to bless you, to strengthen you, to fortify you, sometimes even to comfort you, because as soon as you master the class, you always graduate to the next level. And as we look tonight at Moses, and if we look at the book of Exodus, Moses' life is a series of being born into a matrix and pushed into the next one. He was born out of his mother's womb and pushed into a world that was out to kill him before he had ever even met it. He was born on the hit list of hell. The Pharaoh had listed a decree to destroy him. So as soon as his mother pushed him out of her womb, she had to hide him in the house, which was a womb again. Every womb you come out of brings you into another womb. And instead of gestating in this womb for 9 months, he was there 3 months. And the Bible said that when the baby could no longer be hidden, he went to the next dimension. It's always when you can't stay that you gotta go. As long as a baby can stay in his mother's womb, it will stay. But sooner or later, it's going to outgrow the capacity of the womb in which it was birthed, and suddenly has to go. Ready or not, mama, here I come. I don't care where you are. You can be in the grocery store. You can be washing your hair. You can be typing a term paper. But when I get ready to come out, I'm coming out. I cannot stay in this tight place any longer. If I have to burst things, tear things, move things, rearrange things, I'm coming out. Growth is always disruptive. It will always shake things up. It will always challenge structure and strategy. It will always move in such a way, and generally it will cause pain to go from one matrix to the next. It's gonna hurt somebody somewhere to get it done. So those of you who can't stand to hurt anybody, you can't stand to grow. Somebody's gonna be upset. Somebody's gonna be angry. Somebody's gonna be mad. Somebody's gonna talk about you. Somebody's not gonna believe in you. It is not your job to manage people's feelings and emotions. It is your job to move to the next level. Shout it! And so growth is disruptive, and moving is disruptive, and life is disruptive, and people who don't like disruptions don't like God. Your God is a disruptive God. He said, I came not to bring peace, but a sword. I didn't come to make you comfortable. I didn't come to give you a comfortable chair. I didn't come to make life nice and neat and predictable. I came to stir you up, throw you off balance. I'm at my best when you're at your worst. I am strongest when you are weakest. I am the most profound when you are confused. I'm going to fix you where you have to have me. You got to have me. You will never master life, because the moment you master it, I'll move you into the next dimension. And the Lord sent me from Dallas, Texas, to blow you into the next dimension, to call you out of your comfortable place and tell you you're getting ready to emerge. But in order to emerge where you're going, you got to disrupt where you've been. My wife, had our last child. It was probably, we were too old to have children. We didn't know it. We had our last child in our late 30s. It's not too old, but it's kind of old. And we had our baby boy Dexter right at the time I was pastoring in West Virginia. And Dexter was so big that they kept checking her, thinking she had twins. They said it's got to be twins for him to be that big. I'm trying to remember now. I think he was 21 inches long, and I don't know how to translate it into yours, but he was about 11 pounds. So he was big. He was real big. He was extremely big. And a prophet came to our church and laid hands on my wife and I and said, as it goes with the pregnancy, so shall it go with your ministry. That the baby is a sign of what will happen in your ministry. We didn't know what it meant. We said, amen, God bless you, went on about our business. But as the months passed and the trimesters continued, and she kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and finally she could hold the baby no longer. Her water broke. He was birthed into the world, but he split her pelvis. All of her bones were moved out of place. The first 3 or 4 months she was on a walker and couldn't hardly take care of the baby because he had ripped all of her structure coming out. All structure had to be broken. Bones were moved out of place. It took a while for her to heal. He was so disruptive that everything, he went so far beyond what was expected that her healing process took a long time to occur. She was the only mother in the hospital who was bent over on a walker trying to move from place to place, because that which was within her was so big. He was so much more than what her body was prepared to accommodate. I was scared she would never walk again. She healed up, started walking, got back in place, things normalized, and that's when God called me to go to Dallas. All of my plans were disrupted. Everything was changed. Everything was moved out of place. I had never expected to have to go into another part of the country that I had never been before. And everything that was stabilized began to shake and move out of place. And I looked over at her one night because I was uncomfortable and I was frustrated and I was intimidated. I was moving my mother and moving my family and moving everybody down to a place I had never been. And I was talking like I knew what I was doing, but the truth of the matter is I was scared out of my wits and I didn't know whether it was going to work or not. And I was up about 2 o'clock in the morning, couldn't sleep, and I looked over at her and said, I'm just worried about this and I'm uncomfortable. I don't know what I'm going to do. She fluffed the pillow up over her head, turned over on her side, and before she fell asleep, she said, I had my baby, now you have yours. So I want to say to you, I've had my baby, now you have yours. What God is going to do is going to blow your mind. It is so far beyond what you expected. It is beyond what you have prepared for. It is outside of your comfort zone. It is beyond your normal. He's going to rip some stuff that you thought couldn't be ripped, move some stuff that you thought couldn't be moved, because when you said emerge, the water broke and the birth began, and something is about to happen in your life that is going to blow your mind. 3 months Moses stayed in the house, but when the child could no longer be hidden, they built an ark, a little matrix, and took him from one and put him in another and sailed him down the riverbanks, and there he was in the water again, submerged again, floating again, uncertain again, moving again. I don't know what all he passed by, how many snakes, serpents, gators, but God protected him in the womb while he floated. I cannot tell you how many times he protected me and you while you floated amongst dangerous people and things who sought to kill you, and you could not fight them off, and you couldn't even see them, and he protected you. The very fact that you are here is a testimony to God. The very fact that those that hated you have not utterly devoured you. If you never preach again, if you never write another book, if you never stand behind another pulpit, the very fact that you are here is a testimony to the authenticity of God. For all the enemies and haters and witches and warlocks and demons that sought to kill you, and yet God let you float past them, we know it's God that brought you to where you are. So why did he protect you if he weren't going to move you again? If where you are is the end of it all, then let the gators eat me. The reason God protected you is not because you're wonderful or perfect or special or gifted or holy. God protected you according to his purpose. He has a purpose for you. It is not through your goodness. It is not through your greatness. It is not because you have the only talent that God can ever use. It's not because you are the smartest or the brightest or the best looking or the most wonderful or the most prolific or the most profound. There are people smarter than you in jail. There are people who can out-preach you who are locked up in a dungeon somewhere. There are people who can quote the Bible forwards and backwards. God does not need your talent. What God respects is purpose, and he has chosen you. You are not special. There's none good but the Father. God is delivering you because you are the called according to his, and all things will work together for the good of them that love the Lord, who are the called according to his purpose. You are a child of God's divine purpose. The reason you have to be careful how you treat people, even when they are different than you, look different, sound different, dress different, or think differently than you, is because sometimes you will reject them, not realizing that God uses the strangest people to be your key to the next dimension. It is very seldom who you would choose. Everybody that's key to you may not be kin to you. God will use people that shouldn't even like you, have nothing in common with you. Why is this Egyptian princess fallen in love with this slave baby, the very baby her father is trying to kill? And so God saved him. She reached in the bulrushes, pulled him up out of there, and brought him into the palace because it was large enough. It was large enough, but they talk funny It was large enough that they talked funny. It was large enough that they dressed funny. It was large enough that they looked funny and their skin was different. And it was large enough that they were weird, and he was one of them, but he wasn't one of them. And it was big, but it was uncomfortable. And yet it was the next womb for 40 years. It was the next place that would feed him for 40 years. He was being nursed again and fed again and mentored again. In Egypt, God put him in a strange womb, artificial insemination. Literally in vitro fertilization. God takes that which he has created and sticks it in a foreign womb and makes the womb take it. And for 40 years, he fed from an Egypt mama. And he was in the womb again. And yet he was not one of them. But they gave him something that he wouldn't have gotten had he not gotten into the next womb. A sense of aristocracy and dignity and prestige. A sense of power and influence. Why did God give him that kind of powerful exposure? Whenever God exposes you to somebody, it's for a reason. It's a reason, it's a reason. There's something that they have that he wants you to get. Never assume when God puts you in the next matrix that you are the teacher. Yes, Moses, you may know something about God, but you know nothing about leadership. You know nothing about authority. You know nothing about power. You know nothing about dignity. And yes, you can be nursed at your mother's womb and you can drink her milk, but don't get her attitude, because your mama was born a slave and she's used to being a slave. And for what I'm going to do in your life, I don't want you to think like a slave. I want you to be cocky and strong and tough and virile and powerful. I want you to hold your head up and your back straight, because I'm going to take you to places you've never been, to do things you've never done before. And stop apologizing because the daddy I chose for you does not look like you nor come from where you came from, because I want you to smell like a Pharaoh and walk like a king and have your head up high in the air. And you'd have never learned that. You'd have never learned that if I'd have left you in the house with your mama and them. So I moved you, not just to save your life, but to prepare your future. So here he is in a womb. Here he is in a womb, in vitro fertilized into a nation of people to which he was not kin to, and yet connected to. So he would learn palace protocol. He would learn dignity and leadership. He would learn how to organize troops and amass people. He would learn how to think on another level. He would leave his slave mentality in the unused milk of his mother's breast, and he would start to think like a person of power, because someday down the road God was going to use him to build a nation. And if you're going to be a nation builder, you got to eat dinner with kings. There's some things that you're going through right now that don't even make sense, because the only way it makes sense, the only thing you have to measure sense from is your history. Whenever God does something in your life that doesn't line up with your history, it only means that it lines up with your destiny. Oh my God, you're not shouting as good as I'm preaching, but I'm going to keep right on going. There is something down the road for you that's going to make your whole life make sense. There's something that's about to happen in your life that's going to explain to you why you had to go through what you had to go through. God doesn't give season without reason. There's always a reason for every season in your life. Therefore, we glory in tribulation. For tribulation is worth of patience, and patience experience, and experience hope, and it makes maketh itself not ashamed. Something ahead of you is going to explain what's behind you. It's going to be so good that you're going to look back on what happened and say, it was good for me that I was afflicted. If I had never been afflicted, I wouldn't be ready for what's next. Something is coming down the road. Do you think God just had this meeting so you could come to church? No! Something is about to happen in your life. You need to get this word. You need to get ready for this moment. You need to prepare yourself, for out of your belly shall flow. And by the time Moses had become proficient, by the time he had become fully accepted, by the time he had immersed in the culture of his surroundings, something happened. I don't know whether to elongate my process by dealing with this. When you're an outsider and you come into a new environment, it takes a while for the culture of that new environment to accept you. Everything has culture. Culture has more. Culture is a bigger word than ethnicity. Every church has culture. Every organization has its own culture. Culture is the way you do things. And when you're an outsider and you come in and you don't understand the way people do things, you will make waves if you're not careful. You've got to learn how to come into a new situation and be still until you learn the culture. So the first objective of going into a new opportunity is not to teach, but to watch. You don't jump into the next dimension as a teacher. You jump into the next dimension as a student. Be still and hold your peace and don't talk too much and learn the culture of the atmosphere. Acclimate and assimilate until finally, not only are you learning the culture is learning you. And if you are careful and if you are right and if you are wise, eventually the culture will take you in. Like the mother's body accepted the embryo, the culture will take you in. Because while you are staring at it, it is staring at you. Be careful how you treat the people in the new culture, because even though you are in, you're not in yet. They're nice, but they're not sure yet. They're watching you. There's always people within every organization that are watching you. And every organization, company, business, church, whatever it is, always has security people, and they don't wear badges. These are those invisible people who are gang leaders in that church, in that organization, that if they find you to be foreign, they will come out and get you. Because everybody will eject anything that is foreign. And he had finally, the foreign had come to fit. The foreign had come to fit. It took him 40 years to fit. 40 years to become a part of their way of life. 40 years for them not to look strange when he walked down the hall. 40 years for him to be immersed in the culture enough that he became fully one of them. People can entertain you as a visitor, but that doesn't mean you are one of them. It takes a while to be one with them. Koinonia, to have fellowship, to have communion, to really connect, takes a while for you to be one. To every person who's moving into a new job, new position, new opportunity, don't fool yourself. Just because they gave you an office doesn't make you one with them. So before you hook up with the wrong person on the team, stand back and watch and be still. And you have to be careful and watch out for all the gang leaders in every organization and corporation who will come out and attack you and try to destroy you. And after you have suffered a while, then God will establish you. It takes a while to be established. You have to suffer before you are established in the place. And 40 years he was now established in the place, and he was now good at it, and he now knew the terrain, and he was now accepted, and he was now like Pharaoh's kid, and he was now okay. And then he saw a Hebrew and an Egyptian fighting. And instinct got into a fight with culture. Here Here the Moses who is now accepted as an Egyptian is now looking at a Hebrew boy being beaten up by an Egyptian. And on one side he relates to the Egyptian by culture, but by instinct he relates to the Hebrew. And all of a sudden his culture and his instinct are fighting. Whose side am I on in the fight? Should I go and help the Egyptian because I've been raised with him? Or should I go and save the Hebrew because somehow I am kin to him? And every time they hit him, my face bruises. Because when you are connected to somebody, you cannot stand to see them in pain. I went to see the Passion of the Christ. I took my whole church to see the Passion of the Christ. I bought me a bag of popcorn like you do when you go to a movie. I couldn't eat it. And other people were weeping when Jesus was being beaten. And I wished I could have wept, but I was mad. I wanted to fight because every time they hit him, my face bruised. And I felt like I wanted to stop it because I am by nature a warrior and protective. And my protective instinct rose up and I wanted to fight them off because I was somehow connected to him. Anybody who can watch you be beaten and say nothing, they are not kin to you. Anybody who can watch you suffer and bleed and say he got what he had coming, they were never yours in the first place. If they were ever really yours, something inside of them will rise up and say, don't hit him again. And before Moses knew it, his instinct had kicked in. He wasn't raised with the Hebrew. He wasn't raised as a Hebrew, but his instinct kicked in and he murdered the Egyptian. And murdering the Egyptian was killing out his time in the womb. That incident was an announcement that the water had broke again. And he was being born again. Pushed out of the familiar into the unfamiliar. He was a prince one moment, and now he's a runaway convict. Worse than a slave. He's a runaway convict on the run for the next womb. If you look back over your life and you look real careful, throughout your life, there have been various wombs that birthed you. Am I right about it? Various stages and ages you went through your life that held you for a while, and then you had to move to the next level. And sometimes the people you left behind don't understand why you didn't stay, but you couldn't stay because where you came from was too small for where you're going. And you wouldn't even be here tonight if you hadn't walked away from some stuff to get to where you are. I don't know who I'm preaching to, but I'm talking to somebody in this place right now. If you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth, give him some kind of praise in this house now. Touch everybody you can reach and say, I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta. They're muscled down with Jethro, the Cushites, in shady green pastures. In the tranquility of obscurity, he nursed again. was here he learned to be a shepherd. He lays me down in green pastures. He restoreth my soul. My cup runs over. It was here that he learned to love sheep and to tend them in the pastures and to take them down to the brook and make them drink. It was here in obscurity that he listens at Jethro and learns how to live in the desert. What you can eat and can't eat, where you can most likely find water, how to keep things alive in a dry place. If you've never been in a dry place as a leader, then you can't teach them how to stay alive. In a dry place. And if God's really going to use you in a mighty way, I don't care how anointed and how gifted you are, every now and then he'll put you in a dry place and teach you how to live lonely, how to survive when water doesn't run freely and there are no accolades, how to encourage yourself when you don't feel appreciated. But don't panic, it's just a test. God has not forgotten about you. This is not your destination. This is your transportation. When God gets through working it out, he's going to take you to the next dimension. And the reason he let you go there is that you knew how to be a king, but you didn't know how to be a shepherd. And you didn't know how to lead the unprotected. So first I showed you how to be a king with an army, but then I showed you how to be a leader with sheep. No army, no bells to ring, no butlers, no maids, no protocol, no anything. The reason I exposed you to all of that is because I want you to be strong enough to handle anything. So I let you go through everything, so that no matter what the enemy would try to do to you, you would be able to survive. I raised you lonely. I let you ache in your crib. I let you hurt in your life so that when you go through dry places, you would have survival instincts that would kick you. Oh God, who am I preaching to? I feel like I'm preaching to somebody. Everything, none of the things that happened to you happened because you were cursed. They heard me. I'm going to try y'all out. None of the things that happened to you happened because you were cursed. They happened because you were blessed. Moses has run away from everything wonderful that ever happened to his life. He's run away from it. Everything good that ever happened to him, he's had to run away from it. And now, the guy who dressed in royal robes, surrounded by tapestry and granite pillars and marble floors, is now out there with dust in between his toes, taking care of sheep. And he hadn't had a fancy meal for 30 years. He's boiled his venison in pots, old dirty pots, and drew his water from the well, the things that slaves would do. he's now done them too. And he's had masses of sheep running in between his legs, and he learned how to check them for ticks and diseases. And he learns desert survival techniques while he's there. And by the time he got really good at it, I mean got it really down pat, by the time he got it where he really had it going on and he knew what he was doing, by the time he no longer felt uncomfortable dressed as a shepherd in raggedy burlap coats, by the time he finally stopped missing laying in the palace beds of Egypt, by the time he finally got comfortable with cooking his own dinner and living out there with animals and fighting off wolves and fighting off all types of diseases and manner of evil, by the time he got comfortable with that and he was bringing his sheep in one day, he looked and saw a bush burning. My God, somebody in here, you just saw a bush burning and you've turned around to see because something has got your attention and it's out of your orbit. It's out of your orbit. It's foreign to your atmosphere. It doesn't make sense to see a bush burning and not be consumed. Made him turn aside to watch. The bush burning is the next dimension calling you. Take off your shoes, boy, for the ground you're standing on is holy ground. And the bush called him, Moses, Moses, take off your shoes. Now, had God called him one time, it would have been a conversation. But when God calls him twice, it's a covenant. Whenever God says, Abraham, Abraham, Moses, Moses, or Jesus says, verily, verily, whenever it's said twice, it's a covenant. It's an echo from heaven to earth. Once has he spoken it, echo, twice have I heard it. Power belongs to God. Moses, Moses, take off your shoe. I'm not just having a conversation with you. I'm getting ready to cut a covenant with you. I don't want nothing in between you and me. I want you barefoot standing in my presence. Take off your shoes for the ground you stand on. You thought it was a desert, but it's not. It's holy ground. What you're going through is holy ground. Where you've been hanging out is holy ground. And I can't talk to you about where you are until you respect where I put you. Take off your shoes. The ground you stand on is holy ground. You're not here because of Pharaoh. You are here because of me. I knew when you were in Egypt that you would come to this moment. And the only one who's not surprised is me. Take off your shoes, for the ground you stand on is holy ground. I want you to go back. I want you to go back to the place you ran from. Oh God. I want you to go back to the place where you experienced your greatest failure. But you left as a runaway. You're going to come back as a king. And I want you, because you understand protocol, to set up a meeting between you and the king. And the king will hear you because you learned palace protocol. You know how to get in. You know how to get in where other people don't know how to get in. Anybody else coming from the desert could never hope to get a meeting with the Pharaoh, but you know the palace protocol and you know how things are done, and you learn the culture of the organization, so you don't just have to send a letter and hope somebody reads it. You know exactly who to talk to, who can talk to, who can talk to, who can talk to get the job done. That's why I put you there, to immerse you in the culture so that you could go back and work the system. And so, y'all okay? Y'all doing okay? Am I doing okay? Is this okay? Y'all want me to cut it off? Are you bored? Okay. So then he gets the courage to go back. And this coming back was the biggest thing he'd ever done, because it is in this moment that he makes sense of all that he would ever do. In this moment, he benefits from pain. Make pain pay you. Make pain pay you. Everybody I have ever known who was greatly anointed had gone through some great pain somewhere in their life. I have had the blessing of sitting at the table with some of the most successful people in the world, know most of them very well and very intimately. And as we sit around the dinner table and talk, you would be shocked the horrible stories that they went through before they came to where they're coming. And I came to tell you that the pain you went through is profitable, and you need to make pain pay you. You need to make pain you need to make pain pay you. For every night you cried, for every night you suffered, for every night you almost died, for every terrible, horrific thing that ever happened in your life, it is going to be profitable. It is the pain that produces the power, that releases the glory, that opens up the door for you to come into the next dimension. You people who haven't been through anything, y'all just sit back and listen. I want to talk to the people that's been to hell and back, to the people who suffered and cried and thought you would lose your mind, to the people who had to run away and leap over trees and jump over bushes to get where you are right now. I want to talk to people who cried themselves to sleep and dealt with stuff you couldn't tell nobody about. Is there anybody in this church like that now?